Nothing devastates a marriage like one of the persons having an affair. It destroys trust, it destroys confidence, it breaks intimacy, it violates credibility. It's a terrible, painful, destructive thing. And marriages can survive, but it's difficult. Save yourself from any heartache. Learn how to affair-proof your marriage. Learn how to protect your marriage from an affair. And let me give you 3 key ideas. They come from the book of Proverbs, God's book of wisdom for young men. The first is build some boundaries and barriers. Proverbs 5, verses 1 through 8. This whole chapter, God's talking about being cautious as a young man and staying away from an immoral woman. It says in verse 1, "My son, pay attention to my wisdom." Verse 3, "For the lips of an immoral woman drip honey, and her mouth is smoother than oil. But in the end she's bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword." Then in verse 8 it says, "Remove your way far from her, and do not go near the door of her house." Build some boundaries and some barriers. Don't even get close to having an affair. I put some rules in my life when I first got married that I'm glad I did. One, never alone with a woman of the opposite sex unless she's a family member or she's old enough to be my mother. Never alone with a person of the opposite sex. Second, in our culture, when you're married, you wear a ring. Wear my ring and make it prominent so people know I'm not on the market, I'm married, happily married. Build your mate up in public. Whenever you talk about your mate, do it in a positive way. Share their positive qualities. Share strengths about them. If you look on my Facebook page, you see a picture of my wife and I when I post a picture. Make it prominent that you are happy in your marriage. Never share overly personal or emotional information about your mate. Never do that. Not with especially somebody of the opposite sex. It's not their business. And when you do that, you start creating some intimacy, emotional intimacy that shouldn't be there. When I was first married, a lady in my office who was about my age and who was also married was struggling in her marriage and wanted to talk to me about it. And frankly, I knew that it was dangerous. It was not a good thing. So one day she was being especially sharing with me and wanting to talk to me. And when I got a chance, I called my wife and I said, "Kathy, just come on over here right away during your break. And when you walk in, I'm going to give you a great big kiss." And so she walked in and I gave her a great big kiss right in front of this lady who worked in my office. And from that moment on, it kind of ended her sharing with me. It was not a good thing. Dress modestly. Let people know that you're not on the market. You're not looking for something elsewhere. You're happy at home. Be careful how you touch or how you talk to a person of the opposite sex. Be careful what you do with your hands. Make it very, very, very modest. Very, very, very holy. Second thing, if you're going to have lust in your heart, have it for your mate. It's interesting what it says in Proverbs chapter 6 and verse 25. It says, "Don't lust after the beauty of the immoral woman. For he who goes into," verse 29, "his neighbor's wife, and whoever touches her shall not be innocent." If you're going to have lust in your heart, have it towards your mate. Jesus said the lust in Matthew chapter 5, he says lust leads to adultery. It leads to the act. The thought leads to the act. So if you're going to fantasize about being with somebody in a sexual way, fantasize about your mate. Dream about your mate. Think about your mate. Focus on building that. And the third thing fits in with that is if you're going to have an affair with your mate. Proverbs chapter 5 and verse 18, it says, "Rejoice with the wife of your youth." It says in verse 20, "For why should you, my son, be enraptured with an immoral woman, or be embraced in the arms of a seductress? For the ways of man are before the eyes of the Lord, and he ponders all his paths. If you're going to have an affair, have it with your mate. Several years ago, there was a man in my church that was sharing in his small group leader that he was struggling because there was a lady at work that he had started having an affair with. Well, we got together and talked, and he was telling me how this woman was younger and she was happier than his wife. His wife was kind of depressed and kind of distant, but this woman was younger and she was more lively, and she had beautiful perfume and she was pretty and all these things. And I pointed out the fact that he was being selfish, and he was also causing this woman to commit sin of fornication, as well as he was committing the sin of adultery, and he was also sinning against his wife, and he was sinning against his kids, and he was sinning against God. He was sinning against the family of God. And I called him to repent, and to his credit, he got down on his knees and he repented of his selfishness and his immorality and his sin. And I said, I want you to do this. He had been telling me of all he was doing, writing notes and flirting and all these things he was doing, trying to get alone with this woman at work. I said, you take all the energy and effort you're spending to try and have an affair with this younger woman, and you invest it in your wife. You write her notes, you get her flowers, you bring her candy, you sneak away with her, you get away with her and have a nice weekend. You fantasize about her. If you're going to have an affair, I said, have it with your wife. And he said, well, I don't really feel anything for her right now. She's distant, she's depressed. I said, if you start investing in your wife, I can guarantee you she's not going to continue to be distant and depressed. She's probably distant and depressed because even though she doesn't know it consciously, subconsciously, she knows your heart is not with her, but with somebody else. Well, to his credit, the next several weeks, he wrote her notes, he flirted with her, he brought her flowers, he took her away for a special weekend together, a romantic dinner. He started dating his wife again. He started having an affair with his wife. Well, I saw them after about a month of this, and they came into church, and she was snuggled up next to him, had a hold of his arm, and he had a hold on her, and they were smiling and happy. And I said, well, how's it going? And he said, it's going better than it has ever gone. And she said, I don't know what's got into him, but he's the husband I always wanted him to be. Let me encourage you. You don't have to have an affair with somebody other than your mate. If you want to have an affair with your mate. Fall in love with them again. Date your mate and build your marriage.